Welcome to the latest edition of Fridays with the Fellows from the Oklahoma Center for the Humanities at the University of Tulsa. My name is Katie Moulton. I'm one of the 2019-2020 Fellows in the Interdisciplinary Research Seminar on Play. I'm a writer and a music critic, and I moved to Tulsa to be part of the Tulsa Artist Fellowship. And like everybody else, I'm in quarantine and in the midst of the pandemic, and have been searching for methods of meaning making and some lightness during all of this strange upheaval. So I was really delighted when I was on Twitter and discovered my friend Jordan Jacks had embarked on a special quarantine music related project. And so I invited him to join us in this space to have a conversation about it, talk about music, talk about reflection and pandemic, and share it with all of you. So let me just introduce my friend Jordan on Zoom with us from his home in Ohio. Give us a little wave. Hey, Jordan. Jordan Jacks is a writer from Texas. His fiction has appeared in the Iowa Review, the Yale Review, Electric Literature, Recommended Reading, and elsewhere. He was a former James C. McCrate Fellow in Fiction at the Wisconsin Institute for Creative Writing, and he has taught at UW-Madison, St. Albans School, Washington University in St. Louis, and the Cleveland Institute of Art. He's received scholarships and residencies from Breadloaf, where we met, the Solani Writers Conference, the Key West Literary Seminar, and the very haunted James Merrill House. He's a graduate of Yale and the MFA program at Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri, and he's living in Ohio, where he is finishing up his novel and short story collection. He's also a music aficionado with one of the best record collections that I've ever seen. And one of my fondest memories from when Jordan and I first met was how he would play the abandoned piano in the dining room of Breadloaf. He played it very well, and he kept us waiters going. So that was when I knew that we would be friends. So thank you so much for joining us, Jordan. Yeah, great. And I guess first, I just want you to outline the project that I alluded to in my introduction. What did you embark upon during this time at home?
So I have a lot of vinyl records, and I, like a lot of people who buy albums, sometimes you buy something and you don't listen to it enough, or you feel like, oh, I have so many at home, I wonder what I have that I just never actually spent. And so when it became clear that I was going to be, like everyone else, confined to my home for a lot of the next couple of months, I looked at my record shelf and thought two things. One, I really need to alphabetize all that. And two, what if I just listened to everything? What if I could just listen to all my records? It'll probably take as much time as we're going to be in lockdown. And so both things kind of happened at once. I started alphabetizing, and I thought, well, what if I just listened to everything in order, in alphabetical order by artist? That'll give me something to do. It's fun to organize things, and it's fun to listen to things. And then I thought, it might force me to listen to things that usually I skip over, or force me to listen to albums in sequence that normally wouldn't be played back to back. And I thought it would just sort of be fun. So I started on, I think, March 14th, and have been just going in order ever since.
I like how practical this this project started. Like, I need to alphabetize. It's a task, but won't it be fun? Are you a Virgo by any chance?
Gemini.
Oh, that's right.
So I should be doing something more chaotic, I guess. But.
You really should, but I appreciate this. So you've been listening to every record in your collection in alphabetical order, and then you've been offering a sort of written evaluation of the record, of your experience of listening to it on Twitter, right?
Right. So there, with every album, initially it was sort of several albums per post, and now it's basically one post, one album, with a photo taken of the jacket on my wooden floor, and then whatever 140 characters allow you to say about it, and then highlighting a couple songs if there's particular songs that I really really like. And yeah, it's one long unbroken tweet thread where I think I'm at tweet number 92 or 93 at this point.
Oh, wow. So how big, do you have a sense, or is this something that you're finding out as you go, how big your record collection actually is?
That is something that by the end I will know. I actually have no clue how many I have, and so current estimates, I would bet I have about 400 or 500, but I have no idea. So
Okay. That's good. And you're about to move, right? So this is also helpful in figuring out how many boxes you need.
moving in June, and last time I moved, I bought a certain number of boxes for these records, and I'm sure I'm going to need about 10 more because I've acquired a lot. Since the Midwest is amazing for record shopping, there are so many good record stores here, and there are so many good used record stores that have just amazing things. It's not super picked over. I mean, Cleveland especially has incredible record stores. So the shelves have gotten more and more full since I've lived here.
Nice. And so you've got this massive record collection. How would you describe the collection overall? Does it focus in certain genres or eras, or yeah, how it just as a huge body of your collection, how would you describe it?
It's a pretty interesting mix. I mean, when I'm buying used records, there are certain things that I gravitate to. For instance, ECM jazz, I'm partial to, so I have a lot of that. I have a lot of sort of classic rock in the sort of more 70s Laurel Canyon part. Increasingly, a lot of what I'm buying is ambient or solo guitar, which that's sort of a new interest in the last couple of years. And then there's a fair amount of just sort of my favorite albums, why not have it on vinyl? So, you have to have Purple Rain, or you have to have everybody knows this is Nowhere, that kind of thing. And then some things are things that other people have given me. So I have my grandfather's Johnny Cash records. I have my college roommate's mom's Jackson Browne albums from the 70s. And so it's kind of, it's a fun mishmash.
That's great. How do you sit down and give a record a fair listen? Give it the attention, or do you just put it on in the background and whatever comes up, comes up?
It's different depending on the time. So before quarantine, when I was just listening to records, I would often listen to music in the morning right after I woke up while drinking coffee and concentrating pretty heavily on them just as a way to wake myself up. Now, since my wife and I both are working from home, I can't be as noisy. And so I'm listening to records after my work for the day is done. So I'm listening to them at 5 or 6. It's kind of like cocktail hour. And so it's the time when I'm finally closing my computer. And so I'm listening to things in a really intentional way, just because I have to go analog, and it's a way to sort of turn all the screens off. I don't typically just put stuff on in the background because I'm pretty ADD, and if it's on the background, I will just like listen to music and not do anything else. I can't multitask, in other words. So,
yeah, that's a common question of whether, like, I think there's a distinct divide between people who must have music on in the background to work or can, and folks who are too distracted by it. I think I'm in the latter camp. I'll have too many opinions about my soundtrack if like it's just playing, as even though I'm trying to focus on something else, my attention will be consumed.
That makes total sense. I mean, you're a music journalist and a music critic, so it sparks something in your brain. It doesn't turn anything off for you. It turns more on. And so, yeah, I feel that too. I can only, if I'm trying to work, the only things I can listen to are like really sleepy ambient music, which doesn't always have the effect that I want. So.
Right. So in the play seminar that I was in the fall, which what you don't know about, but it was a gathering of about 10 scholars from different backgrounds, different departments, different areas of expertise. And we all got together and talked about the concept of play from all of these different vantage points. So there's a video game designer, and there's literature professors, and there's, just board game enthusiasts, and just sort of across the spectrum. But one common point that we kept coming back to in terms of play was that play requires constraints, play requires limits, that there's a magic circle of play, that a group of people enter that special space and agree to a set of seemingly arbitrary rules. And because of those conditions, play or creation of some sort can happen. So I was wondering, do you view this project that you've embarked upon as sort of a response to the constraints of our current moment?
100%. Constraints of the current moment, one being that I'm stuck in my house. Two, that I'm stuck in my house often on my computer, and I would prefer some way to sort of turn that off, and doing so with a very analog process as a way of doing that. Third, constraint in the sense that what I'm listening to is not what I'm choosing anymore. It's what the alphabet is choosing. And so that creates a sense of play sometimes by the oddity of the juxtaposition. And there's great pleasure sometimes in going from, from solo acoustic guitar to like really hard 70s funk. And not being able to prepare yourself or sort of think, what am I in the mood for? But making music sort of put you into a mood. And then I guess the last constraint would be using Twitter. Since there's a 140 character limit, any thoughts I have about an album have to be expressed pretty quickly and pretty succinctly. And that sort of, that forces me to focus in a different way on music than I previously have.
Yeah. Another limit that occurs to me is that you're working with the collection that you already have.
Exactly.
You're not going out and buying new records.
Right.
In the same way that none of us are necessarily going out and having brand new experiences in this time.
Right.
Yeah. So it's sort of the limit of reflecting on what you've already acquired or what you have in front of you.
Right. There's my mom used to say when I was a kid and wanted to go to McDonald's, we have food at home. And that's kind of what this is like. We have records at home. Why don't you listen to them? And so there have been things, because I'm forced onto my home stores, there have been records I haven't listened to in over 10 years that I totally forgot about, that now I deeply love. And that's one of the real sort of joys and sort of the play that I'm getting out of it, is that surprise of forgetting what you even have.
Yeah, and revisiting maybe moments in your past, the versions of yourself that bought that album however many years ago. Yeah, that's so
right. There's a good example. So this is a record called Beach Beat Volume 2, which I bought at Vintage Vinyl in 2010.
That's my favorite record store in the world, obviously. It's in St. Louis, Missouri, everyone, on Del Mar.
I bought it for $10 just because I thought the photo was funny, and hadn't listened to it since I bought it. Put it on thinking it was going to be a sort of surf rock compilation. It is in fact like an incredible soul and R&B compilation that has been marketed, I suppose, to attract like a early 60s very white demographic, but it is all very, very Black music. And so don't trust the cover. And I was just sort of, listening to music by Willie T, the Clovers, the Coasters, King Curtis, and the Kingpins, stuff that I didn't expect to even be on this record. And now I'm spinning it like all the time. I forgot I owned this. So yeah, that's the kind of surprise sometimes that happens.
Are there any other albums or juxtapositions that have stood out or surprised you?
Yeah, I pulled one.
Okay.
So the record that's playing behind me that you can't really hear is by Marissa Anderson, who's a guitarist from Portland. Solo guitar, really pretty meditative stuff. It's one of my favorite albums from 2018, I think. But going in alphabetical order, the album that came right after that was Roy Ayers' Everybody Loves the Sunshine. So
Nice.
70s vibraphone funk classic. And could not be more different in mood than Marissa Anderson, but an amazing album. And then after that, in alphabetical order, you get Wally Badarou, a French Senegalese session musician from the 80s who plays synthesizer. Super kind of bouncy, African high life inspired 80s pop. These are not three records I would ever put in the same DJ set, but they work. And sort of going from each to the next I was just surprised at every turn. It's hilarious to think of them being next to each other on the shelf because they are so different, but also I love that they're next to each other on my shelf.
Yeah, that sort of contradictory nature of the rules that you've put in place, but then the randomness that results from those rules and the sort of the way that it fits together in a pleasing, manner is really exciting.
Yeah, I started to think of like what a super group of those three artists would be like. And I think they would love playing with each other.
I want that Wally Badarou album. That's not an artist that's on my radar, but that sounds incredible.
I'll put it on. You probably won't be able to hear it. He's incredible. It's like imagine if off the wall era Michael Jackson didn't have any vocals, but was like a little more spacey and stretched out. It sounds like if it came out 2 years ago, it would be Best New Music 9.0.
Yeah, maybe a reissue.
Right.
That's great. I guess I'm wondering, in our play seminar, we also talked a lot about the relationship that play might have with the work that artists do. So how does music relate to your writing or other artistic endeavors? Does it pop up? Maybe are your fictional characters music aficionados?
Yeah, that's interesting. My agent, when she read my novel, actually had a comment, which is, okay, you've done the song playing in the background trick too many times. Because apparently in too many scenes, I had a very nice sort of mixtape selection playing at a party or in a restaurant. So she limited me to two of those. The two that made the book ended up being Randy Newman's cover of Baltimore by Nina Simone. Sorry, Nina Simone's cover of Baltimore by Randy Newman. And Is That All There Is by Peggy Lee.
Oh, that's amazing.
So yeah, and I'm a drummer too. And so drumming is part of my practice. When I get stuck writing, I often go down to my basement and beat the hell out of my drums. But I don't typically listen to music when I write because, again, like we were saying before, it distracts me. I get too into it. I need a little more quiet.
Yeah, I like the idea of how drumming can play into your writing practice, not only as a release and a break and let me not strangle the words to death, but also it probably affects the rhythm of your sentences.
That is a really nice point. Yeah, it does. I mean, I think typing is percussive. And writers always talk about getting into a rhythm. But I think that one of the things that I'm most attuned to as a writer is rhythm, the rhythm of a sentence. And I will often think about it not in prosody terms, not in metrical feet, so much as drum beats. That's a very instinctive way for me to think about how a sentence can start, gather speed, slow down, speed up, that kind of thing.
That's very cool. Okay, I have one last question. And it just occurred to me as we were talking, but since this is such a lonely time that many of us are experiencing, do you ever think about that line from the movie Almost Famous, classic film of our youth, when Penny Lane says, if you ever get really lonely, you just go to the record store and visit your friends. Do you know that line?
Yeah.
Do you feel that way?
I do. My favorite record store is 2 blocks from my house, and every Friday, for as long as I can remember living in Cleveland, shout out to Hausfrau Records, I would walk down, allow myself to buy one album. There's the constraint again, and then say hello to the owner, and then walk down the street to my favorite bar for a beer, and then start the weekend. And so it's a sort of cherished ritual for me. But I've also become friends with the owner a little bit, and I've become friends with that tiny shop selection, which doesn't change all that much. So every time I'm in there, I'm thinking maybe this week is the week I get really into Zydeco, or maybe this is the week that I finally, you know, start listening to a lot of dub, which they have a lot of. And yeah, I think of that as like a really cherished part of my Cleveland community. And of course, when you go to a record store too, you're seeing your friends being the artists that you're listening to, which I think what Penny Lane is talking about. But I think it has been a way for me to meet people, and a way for me to really sort of build a bond with the city here after I moved here. So it's something I deeply miss. I mean, I love listening to these records at home, but I cannot wait until I can go outside, walk down the street, and go down to the little tiny record store that I usually go to. It'll be time to add to the collection a little bit, I think.
Yes. Well, hopefully that we're back to crate digging sooner rather than later. And in the meantime, you're going to keep working through your record collection on Twitter at Jordan Jacks.
Jordan R. Jacks.
Jordan R. Jacks. I will put that in our subtitles so everyone can go find you there and check out your writing as well. Thank you so much for joining us on Fridays with the Fellows. And I hope to see you and listen to some music together in person real soon.
Thanks so much for having me, Katie.